A boot kicked open a half-rotten door. Dust exploded into a slant of light. A man stepped through with a rifle in one hand and a folded paper in the other. He froze. 3 feet ahead, a shotgun barrel was pointed straight at his chest. Hands holding it. Small hands. Pale knuckles. The face behind it belonged to a woman. She did not speak. She did not blink. Her finger sat on the trigger like she had practiced this exact moment 1,000 nights in the dark. He raised the paper slow. Held it up between 2 fingers. Said nothing. The barrel did not drop. His name was Cowboy. Hers he did not know yet. But somewhere under the silence he could feel it. Whatever brought him to this dead ranch had brought her too. What she said next changed both their lives. Stay with me on this one. 2 days earlier, Caleb Roy had stood in the back of a county auction house holding the only dollar bill in his pocket. The auctioneer had been trying to unload the place for an hour. No bidders. The paperwork said a ranch. 1,400 acres of dry grass, a creek that ran half the year, and a house nobody had wanted to live in for going on 5 winters. The previous owner had walked off. Tax sale. No heirs. The bank wanted it gone. $1. That was the opening bid the auctioneer finally settled on, just to close the file. Caleb had raised his hand. Nobody else had. He had walked out of that office with a deed and a smirk, and the kind of quiet that comes over a man when he realizes his life just changed shape, and he isn't sure into what. He was 38 years old. He had spent 20 of those years working other men's cattle on other men's land. He had no wife. He had no debts. He had a horse named Smoke and a saddle older than the horse, and a long, patient kind of tiredness that had been sitting in his chest for about a year. He had wanted a piece of ground he didn't have to leave. The ride out had taken a day and a half. The road thinned to a trail. The trail thinned to ruts. And then there were no ruts at all, just the memory of a wagon path under the prairie grass. He had ridden that memory until he saw the roof. The house was worse than he expected. Half the porch was sagging. 2 windows broken. The barn had a corner missing where the wind had found it and pulled. But the walls stood. The chimney stood. And from the rise above the creek, a man could see weather coming for 10 miles. He had liked that. He had not liked the boot prints. Coming back from the well, he had found tracks in the dust by the kitchen door. Small. A woman's. Recent. Not days old. Hours. He had drawn his rifle. He had stepped onto the porch slow. Pushed the door with his boot. And that was where the shotgun barrel had found him. So now they stood. A woman with a gun. A man with a paper. 3 feet of dust-thick air between them. He spoke first. Quiet. He said, "I'm not here to hurt you, ma'am. I'm the new owner of this place. That paper in my hand is the deed." She did not move. He said, "I bought it at the county for $1. There was no notice anyone was living here." A long second passed. Her eyes flicked to the deed. Flicked back to him. She said, "Set it on the floor." Her voice was quiet too. Not afraid. Tired. He set the deed on the floor. She said, "Step back." 3 steps. He stepped back. 3 steps. She moved forward, the shotgun never lowering, and crouched down without taking her eyes off him. She picked up the paper one-handed. "Read it." He watched her face. He watched the moment she got to his name. He saw her shoulders drop 1/4 of an inch. Not surrender. Recognition. Like a thing she had been waiting on had finally come up the road. She straightened. Lowered the shotgun. Not all the way. Halfway. She said, I'm Eliza Gray. I've been living in this house for 4 months. I don't have anywhere else to go, and I don't have any money. If you tell me to leave, I'll leave. But I'm asking you not to. Caleb Roy looked at her. He looked at the broken windows and the sagging porch, and the woman in the doorway who had been pointing a gun at him a minute ago, and was now asking, very plainly, for her life to stay where it was. He said, lower the gun all the way, Eliza Gray. We can talk about it. She lowered the gun. And that was how a man who had paid $1 for 1,400 acres found out he had also paid for a woman he didn't know was already there. That first night, Caleb slept in the barn. He laid out his bedroll on a corner of clean hay and put his rifle within arm's reach and lay there in the dark thinking about a woman he had known for less than 3 hours, who was now sleeping inside the only building he owned. He thought about asking her to leave in the morning. He thought it would be the smart thing, the clean thing. He did not ask her to leave in the morning. In the morning, he found her at the well. She had a length of rope in her hands and was working a knot loose with the kind of patience a person learns when they have done a thing alone for a long time. The well rope had snapped 2 months ago, she said, and she had been hauling water from the creek in a bucket since. She was tying it back together. She knew how. He watched her hands. He said, I'll fix the roof. You handle the well. That's the trade for now. She nodded. She did not thank him. He liked that. 3 days passed like that. He worked the roof. She worked the well, then the kitchen garden that had gone half feral. They did not talk much. They ate at the same table at sundown, and then she went to her room and he went to the barn. He learned things slow. He learned she was 29. He learned she had been a schoolteacher once. He learned she had a brass locket she touched at her throat when she thought he wasn't looking. He learned she did not flinch at coyotes, but she flinched when a horse came up the road. She would not say where she had come from. He did not push. On the 4th day, the riders came. 3 of them. On tall horses. Caleb saw them from the rise where he was patching the corner of the barn. He came down off the ladder slow. He told Eliza, who was kneeling in the garden, to go inside. To go down into the root cellar and pull the trap door shut and not come up no matter what she heard. She went. She did not ask why. That told him something. The riders pulled up at the porch. The lead man was big and clean-shaven and wore a dark coat that did not belong on a working horse. He had a pistol on his hip and a paper in his hand. He said, afternoon. Looking for a woman. Dark hair. About so tall. Goes by the name Eliza Gray. Maybe Eliza Carroll. We have reason to believe she came this way. Caleb leaned on his rifle. Casual. He did not raise it. He did not need to. He said, I bought this place at county auction last week. Paid $1. Came out here to find half a roof and a snake in the kitchen. I've been alone 3 days. Haven't seen a soul on this road but you. The man in the dark coat looked at him. He looked at the half-patched roof. He looked at the corral that had a horse in it but no second saddle. He looked at the door of the house. He said, mind if we look around? Caleb said, I do mind. I paid for this place. I don't know you. You want to come on my land, you come back with a sheriff and a paper. Until then, you turn around at that gate. The man in the dark coat smiled with no warmth in it. He said, fair enough, mister. A pause. What did you say your name was? Caleb said, I didn't. The man tipped his hat. Real slow. Like he was making a note of the face under it. The 3 of them turned their horses and rode out the way they came. Caleb stood on the porch until the dust had settled, and then for 10 minutes after that. He watched the road. He watched the rise. He watched the scrub on the far side of the creek, where a man could lie down in the grass and wait. When he was sure, he went to the cellar and he opened the trap door and he said, "They're gone. Come up." She came up. Her face was the color of paper. He said, "Eliza." She said, "I know. I know. I'll tell you. Just let me tell you over supper. I can't do it standing up." So they ate. She had cooked beans and a piece of pork, and there was bread she had baked that morning. He ate slow. He watched her hands. They had stopped shaking by the time she got to the second piece of bread. She told him. She told him her husband had died 14 months ago. A fall from a horse, the family had said. A bad fall. She told him she had not believed it. She told him her husband's brother, a man named Henry Caro, who owned a piece of every railroad spur in the county, had wanted the land that had been left to her. She told him she had refused to sign it over. She told him things had begun happening. A fire in the barn. A dead dog on the porch. A letter under the door saying she would meet her husband sooner than she thought. She told him she had run. She had run with a horse and a satchel and the brass locket at her throat, which had been her mother's, and she had ridden until the horse threw a shoe, and she had walked until she found a road, and the road had led her here, to a house with a broken door and no one inside, and she had stayed because she could not think of anywhere else to go, and because she had begun to hope in some quiet, unreasonable way that no one would ever come to this place again. Then he had come. She looked at him across the table. She said, "I don't know who you are, Caleb Roy. I don't know why I'm telling you this. But when I read your name on that deed, I felt something I have not felt in a year. I felt like maybe a thing was going to be all right." Caleb did not answer for a while. The fire popped in the stove. The wind eased outside. A coyote called once and was answered far off. He poured her a cup of coffee. He poured one for himself. He set both cups down with the kind of care a man uses when he is making a decision he does not yet have words for. He said, "You're not going anywhere, Eliza. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until this thing is done and you choose where you want to be." She looked at him. She did not cry. She just nodded and took the cup and held it in both hands. The window above the kitchen sink exploded inward at first light. Glass hit the floor. A second shot punched a hole through the doorframe. Caleb was already moving off the cot in the front room, rifle in his hand, dragging Eliza off the chair where she had been mending a sleeve and behind the iron stove in 2 motions. He yelled, "Stay down." He did not yell it twice. He crawled to the front window, lifted his head an inch, looked. 6 men. Not 3. 6. They had come at dawn the way men come, when they don't intend to leave anyone alive to tell about it. The man in the dark coat was not with them. He was not stupid enough to be with them. But Caleb knew, from the way they spread around the house and the way 2 of them peeled off toward the barn and the corral, that this was not squatters being chased off, and it was not a sheriff serving a paper. This was a cleanup. This was a man who had decided he could not afford a witness. That changed everything. A minute ago this had been a woman with a story. A minute ago this had been a fight he could maybe walk through with a deed and a calm voice, and a man's right to his land. Now it was different. Now it was about whether anyone walked off this ranch alive. He crawled back to Eliza. He pressed the shotgun into her hands. He said, "Anyone comes through that back door who isn't me, you pull both triggers." She took the gun. Her hands were not shaking now. They had stopped shaking at supper the night before, and they had stayed stopped. He said, "I'll be back." She said, "Caleb." He stopped. She said, "Don't die out there." He said, "I don't intend to." He went out the side window low, into the dry grass, and he moved along the foundation of the house, the way a man moves who has hunted and been hunted in equal measure. He came around the back corner. He saw the first man at the corral, working the latch. He shot him once. The man dropped without a word. The second man at the corral spun, raised a pistol. Caleb shot him too. He went down on top of the first one. Two. The other four came around the house. They came in a hurry. That was their mistake. Caleb had the corner. Caleb had the rising sun behind him. Caleb had a rifle that had been keeping him company on 100 lonesome trails, and he knew its weight the way another man knows his own hand. He fired 3 more times in 8 seconds. 2 of the 4 went down. The third caught a round in the leg and screamed and went sideways into the wall. The fourth, the smartest one, turned and ran for his horse. Caleb let him go. He wanted him to go. He wanted that man to ride back to whoever was waiting in town and tell him exactly what had happened on this ranch this morning. He wanted Henry Caro to hear it from a man whose voice still shook. The man on the ground with the leg wound was crying. Caleb walked over. He kicked the pistol away from him. He said, "Who sent you?" The man cried harder. Caleb said it again. Slow. "Who sent you?" The man said a name. Caleb already knew the name. Caleb said, "You're going to live. You're going to ride out of here on a horse with your friend's body on the saddle in front of you. You're going to ride straight to the sheriff in town. You're going to tell him exactly what you did this morning and exactly who paid you to do it. If I hear you went anywhere else first, I will find you. Do you understand me?" The man understood. Caleb pulled him up, tied his leg with a strip of his own shirt, put him on a horse, tied a body across the saddle in front of him, slapped the horse on the rump. The horse went. Caleb stood in the yard with the smell of powder in the air and watched it go until it was a dot on the road, and then nothing. He went back inside. Eliza was in the kitchen with the shotgun across her knees and a piece of glass in her hair. She looked up. She said, "How many?" He said, 5 down. 1 running. They won't try this again the same way. She said, "They'll try it another way." He said, "I know." He sat down across from her. He put the rifle on the table between them. He picked the piece of glass out of her hair gentle, with 2 fingers, and set it on the windowsill. He said, "Eliza, I want to tell you something, and I want to tell you once." She waited. He said, "I bought this ranch for $1 because I wanted a place I didn't have to leave. I have spent 20 years working ground that belonged to somebody else. This ground belongs to me. And whoever is on it with me by my choice, that's mine to defend. You're on this ground by my choice now. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" She understood. She did not say anything. She put her hand over his on the table. She left it there. He turned his hand over, held hers. Listen. If you're still with me on this story, hit that subscribe button. There's a lot of road left in this one, and I want you riding it with me. 2 hours later, Caleb had a plan. He saddled Smoke. He told Eliza to bolt every window and door and to keep the shotgun in arm's reach and not to come out for any voice but his. He kissed her on the forehead, the first time he had touched her like that, and it was quick, and it was not a question. It was a statement. He said, "I'm going into town. I'll be back before sundown." He rode out. He had business with a man named Henry Caro. Caleb did not ride into town first. He rode to the sheriff's office at the edge of town, where a man named Hollis Bain had been wearing a star for 19 years and had outlived 2 governors and 3 railroad companies, and did not scare easy. Caleb laid it all out on the desk. The deed, the story, the bodies, The name of the man on the ground with the leg wound, who by Caleb's reckoning should be coming through the door any hour now if he had not lied, and if he had lied, Caleb would handle it himself. The name Henry Caro. The name Eliza Gray. Everything. Hollis Bain listened without saying a word. When Caleb was done, the sheriff opened a drawer. He pulled out a folder. He laid the folder on the desk. He said, "Mr. Roy, I've been waiting for somebody to come into this office and tell me that name for 14 months. The Caro family is the reason I started keeping this folder. I never had cause to open it because nobody would talk." He looked up. He said, "Will she talk?" Caleb said, "She'll talk." The sheriff closed the folder. He said, "Then we're going to handle this today." It happened faster than Caleb had thought it would. By noon, the man with the leg wound had been brought in by two of the sheriff's deputies, who had found him on the road exactly where Caleb said he would be, and who had heard the whole story out of him before he could change his mind about telling it. The man had named Henry Caro on paper. He had named the foreman who hired him. He had named the saloon where the money had changed hands. By 1 o'clock, the sheriff had a warrant. By 2 o'clock, he had a posse. By 3 o'clock, he and Caleb and 4 deputies were standing on the wide front porch of a white house on the edge of town that belonged to a man named Henry Caro, who had thought, an hour earlier, that his morning had gone exactly to plan. Henry Caro opened the door himself. He was not a big man. That was the first thing Caleb noticed. He was a slim, clean man with a thin mustache and pale hands, and he wore a watch chain across his vest that probably cost more than every horse Caleb had ever owned put together. He smiled when he saw the sheriff. The smile faltered when he saw Caleb behind him. The sheriff said, "Henry Caro, you're under arrest for the murder of your brother and conspiracy to murder Eliza Gray." Henry Caro did not say anything for a second. Then he said very smooth, "Sheriff Bain, I think there has been a mistake." The sheriff said, "There has been. It was yours. Step out onto the porch, please." Henry Caro looked past the sheriff. He looked at Caleb. He said, "And you? You must be the new owner of that ranch." Caleb said, "I am." Henry Caro said, "I'll give you $10,000 for it. Right now. In gold. You walk away. You take your horse and your bedroll, and you go anywhere in this country that isn't here. You never have to think about any of this again." Caleb said, "No." Henry Caro said, 20,000. Caleb said, "No." Henry Caro's smile got tight. He said, "You have no idea who you are talking to." Caleb said, "I know exactly who I'm talking to. I'm talking to a man who killed his own brother for a piece of dirt, and then sent 6 men to kill a woman in her sleep because she wouldn't sign it over. I'm talking to a coward in an expensive vest. I'm not for sale, Mr. Caro. The ranch is not for sale. The woman is not for sale. Step out onto the porch like the sheriff said." Henry Caro's hand moved. It moved toward his vest, where the watch chain hung, and where, Caleb saw a half-second too late, a small pistol was tucked behind the silk lining. Caleb was faster. He had been faster than men with guns in their hands for 20 years. He was faster than a man with a gun, in a vest by a long, long way. He hit Henry Caro in the jaw with the butt of his rifle. The man went down on his own front porch in a heap of expensive cloth and broken teeth. The pistol clattered onto the boards. The sheriff put his boot on it. 2 deputies rolled Henry Caro over and put irons on his wrists. Caleb stood over him. He looked at the man on the porch. The man who had ordered a fire and a dead dog and a letter under a door. The man who had paid 6 riders to kill a woman before breakfast. The man whose own brother had gone into a creek bed with a broken neck so he could have a piece of land he didn't even need. Caleb crouched down. He pulled a signet ring off Henry Caro's right hand. a heavy gold ring with a C on it. He held it up so the man could see it through one swelling eye. He said, "I'm going to give this to your brother's wife. I expect she'll throw it in the creek. But she should be the one to choose." He stood up. He turned to the sheriff. He said, "Are we done here?" The sheriff said, "We're done." Caleb walked off the porch. He got on his horse. He rode out of town, with the sun coming sideways through the cottonwoods and the gold ring in his coat pocket, and the long, patient tiredness in his chest finally beginning to break apart into something that was not tiredness anymore. He rode home. He rode to her. He came up the wagon path at dusk, with the last of the light caught in Smoke's mane, and the dust rising slow behind him. She was on the porch. She had a rifle across her knees and the brass locket at her throat, and she was sitting on the top step with the patience of a woman who had been waiting on something her whole life, and had only in the last 12 hours figured out what. She saw him at the rise. She did not stand up. She did not run. She just set the rifle down beside her on the boards and put both hands flat on her knees and waited for him to come the rest of the way. He came the rest of the way. He swung down off the horse at the foot of the steps. He pulled his hat off. He stood there in the dust with his hair flat against his head, and a witness, and a warrant and a confession. "It's done, Eliza." She closed her eyes. She did not cry. She opened them again. She said, "Come up here, Caleb." He came up. He sat on the step beside her. He pulled the gold ring out of his coat pocket and put it in her open hand. He said he wanted to give me $10,000 to walk away. Then 20. He thought I had a price. She looked at the ring. She said, "What did you tell him?" He said, "I told him I wasn't for sale. I told him this place wasn't for sale. I told him you weren't for sale." She closed her hand on the ring. She said, "Was that the order you put it in?" He said it was. She nodded. She stood up. She walked to the edge of the porch. She drew her arm back and threw the ring as far as she could into the long grass past the corral. The grass moved once where it landed, and then did not move again. The light went the rest of the way down behind the rise. She came back. She sat down beside him. She leaned her shoulder against his shoulder. She said, "Caleb." He said, "Yes." She said, "Stay." He said, "I'm staying." That was all that needed saying that night. The first month they fixed the porch. The second month they fixed the barn. He bought 2 cows on credit at the market and walked them home, and she met him at the gate with a cup of cold water and the kind of smile that a woman wears when she has stopped looking over her shoulder. The third month, the deputies came back out with paperwork. Henry Carroll had been convicted in a county court. 20 years. The land that had been Eliza's husband's, and that had been the reason for the whole long, bloody mess, was confirmed in her name, free and clear. She signed the paper. She thanked the deputy. She closed the door. She walked into the kitchen, where Caleb was kneading bread, and she said, "I want to sell the Carroll land." He said, "Sell it." She said, "I want to use the money to fix this place up the way it should be. Real well. Real corral. Real fence. New roof. New windows." He said, "Sell it." She said, "And I want to marry you, Caleb Roy." He stopped kneading. He looked at her. He said, "When?" She said, "Spring." They were married in the spring. It was a small wedding. Sheriff Hollis Bain stood up as a witness. A preacher came out from town and read words on the porch, and they said the words back, and that was that. She wore a dress the color of a winter sunrise. He wore his good coat, which was less good than her dress, and he wore the long, patient tiredness gone from his chest and replaced by a thing that did not have a name yet, but that he had begun, some mornings, to recognize. The deed went up on the wall above the kitchen table. A piece of folded paper, yellowed at the edges now. $1's worth of land on the bottom of it. 2 names on the top. She had pinned it there one evening without telling him she was going to. He had walked in from feeding the horses and seen it, and stopped in the doorway and not said anything for a long time. She had said, "Is that all right?" He had said, "That's all right." Some nights late, when the wind came over the rise and the coyotes called from the creek and the lamp was low, she would put her hand on his chest and feel his heartbeat under her palm, and she would think about the morning she had pointed a shotgun at a stranger's chest from 3 feet away, and she would think about how close she had come to pulling the trigger, and she would think about how a single dollar bill folded in a stranger's hand had bought the entire rest of her life. She would not say any of this out loud. She did not have to. He knew. He had ridden a long road to a place no one wanted, and he had found a woman already there, and the truth was that neither of them had known, until they saw each other through a doorway in the dust, that they had been riding toward each other the whole time. $1. It had been the cheapest piece of ground in the county. It had also been the only one in the world that mattered.